unsolved cases in all of American history. This is the story of the son of Sam. In Pelham Bay, Bronx, New York, on July 29, 1976, 18-year-old Donna Loria and her 19-year-old friend, Judy Valenti, are hanging out in Jody's car by Donna's house. They're talking about the events of the night that was spent at a local disco. Suddenly, a stranger approaches. He pulls out a gun from a paper bag and fires 5 shots into the car. Donna's father, about to walk his dog, hears the shots and runs over and finds his daughter shot dead and Jody hysterically crying by Donna's body. EMS arrives in minutes and she's taken to the hospital where she gives police a description of the attacker. He is described as a white male about 30 years old with dark curly hair. Back at the crime scene, police recover 3 .44 caliber bullets. They also learn from neighbors that a suspicious yellow car was parked in the neighborhood. Because the crime took place in an Italian neighborhood, the NYPD's first theory is that it's a mob hit with a case of mistaken identity. Flushing, Queens, New York, October 23rd, 1976, 1:30 a.m. 22-year-old Carl De Niro and 18-year-old Rosemary Keenan are making out in their car. Suddenly, there's a loud bang and the windows shatter. Rosemary panics. She gets the car in gear and speeds off towards the bar they just came from. She suffers only superficial cuts from the glass, but Carl is in bad shape. He's been shot in the head. Amazingly, he survives, although surgeons have to implant a metal plate in his skull. In the meantime, the NYPD is on the scene, collecting witness statements and searching Rosemary's car. Inside, embedded in the seat, they find .44 caliber bullets. However, the police do not connect this to the Loria Valenti shooting, despite the similarities and despite the fact that both involved .44 caliber bullets, because the cases are being investigated by different precincts. Belrose, Queens, New York, November 26, 1976, 11:55 p.m. Teenagers Donna DeMasi and Joanne Lamino are walking to Joanne's house after seeing a movie. After reaching the house, they spend time outside talking. After midnight, a young man approaches them asking for directions. Suddenly, the man pulls out a gun and starts firing. A shot hits Donna in the neck and another hits Joanne in the back. Within minutes, EMS arrives and take the girl to the hospital. Both miraculously survive, but Joanne is rendered a paraplegic. Again, the police recover .44 caliber bullets from the crime scene, just like the previous shootings. Officers question Joanne Lamino's neighbors. They mention seeing a tall, thin man with dirty blonde hair flee the scene with a gun in his hand. This makes the NYPD consider the possibility that this is the same shooter as in the previous cases. However, the witnesses' descriptions of the assailant don't match, so the police discount the theory. Ridgewood, Queens, New York, January 30th, 1977, 12:30 a.m. John Deal and his fiancée Christine Freund are sitting in their car outside Station Square Plaza. They just saw a movie and are considering where to go next. As they're about to drive off, 3 shots penetrate the car. John suffers only superficial injuries and he speeds off to get help. Unfortunately, Christine has suffered 2 gunshot wounds and doctors are unable to save her life. Police interview John Deal, but as he never saw the shooter, he has nothing to offer. For the first time, NYPD alerts the public that they believe that the rash of shootings of women and couples are connected. They release 2 separate police sketches corresponding to the 2 different descriptions they have. Ballistics testing revealed that the .44 caliber bullet was most likely fired by a bulldog, which is a revolver used for close-range targets. This makes the police believe that in fact there is only one shooter. Forest Hills, Queens, New York, March 8, 1977, 7:30 p.m. 20-year-old Virginia Voskerichian is walking home from the subway station. As she is walking, she encounters a man coming towards her. She tries sidestepping to avoid him, but as he passes, he pulls out a gun. She instinctively tries to shield her face with her textbook. The man fires, penetrating the book, and unfortunately also her skull. She's dead before she hits the ground, just 100 yards away from the spot where Christina Freund died 5 weeks earlier. Police arrive within minutes, interviewing witnesses. One resident says he ran into a man fleeing the scene just seconds after the shooting. He describes him as short and husky and around 18 years old. Other witnesses confirm this observation. As officers process the scene, they find an intact .44 caliber bullet. Ballistics tests confirm that this bullet matches one of the previous cases. On March 10th, the NYPD holds a joint press conference with the mayor to announce that the same .44 Bulldog revolver was used to kill both Donna Loria and Virginia Voskerichian. Local newspapers begin writing daily articles nicknaming him the .44 caliber killer. The coverage instills panic in New Yorkers about the serial killer running free and shooting people at random. On April 14, 1977, the NYPD assembles the Operation Omega Task Force to hunt down the serial killer. The task force is comprised of 200 detectives under the command of Deputy Inspector Timothy Dowd. The NYPD remains on high alert and are patrolling Lover's Lanes areas in the Queens and the Bronx, but just days later, the shooter strikes again. Bronx, New York, April 17th, 1977, 3 a.m. 18-year-old college student Valentina Suriani and her longtime friend Alexander Esau are sitting in a parked car on a service road. Suddenly, 2 bullets pierce the passenger side window, striking her in the head, killing her instantly. Alexander then takes 2 shots to his head. First responders arrive within minutes. Alexander is taken to the hospital, but dies 2 hours later. There are no witnesses. However, prior to fleeing the scene, the shooter left an envelope addressed specifically to the Omega Task Force. The envelope contains a handwritten letter, but the crime lab is unable to lift any meaningful prints from it. Still, the letter itself provides some clues. In it, the killer expresses his desire to continue his work, saying, "I love to hunt, prowling the streets looking for fair game." The killer seems to be relishing not only in the fear that he's created throughout the city, but also in taunting New York's finest and their fruitless efforts. Before long, certain parts are revealed to the press, including the writer's self-declaration, "I am a monster. I am the son of Sam." On May 30th, Daily Star columnist Jimmy Breslin receives a handwritten letter from someone claiming to be the son of Sam. Breslin responds in a newspaper article in which he urges the man to turn himself in. Bayside, Queens, New York, June 26, 1977, 3:20 a.m. 17-year-old Judy Placido and her friend Sal Lupo are sitting in his car sharing a cigarette after a night of dancing. The 2 friends are actually discussing the son of Sam when 2 gunshots ring out. Both survive the attack but are severely wounded, and unfortunately neither of them saw their attacker. 2 eyewitnesses soon come forward, reporting that they saw a tall, dark-haired man in a leisure suit fleeing the area. The NYPD remains on high alert, especially considering the killer wrote to Jimmy Breslin that he would strike again on the anniversary of his first killing, which indeed was on July 29th. Much of New York flies into a panic, and the streets are empty at night. The NYPD establishes a sizable dragnet that extends way beyond the killer's known hunting grounds. With the killer's anniversary of July 29th coming up, a heat wave strikes the city, causing massive blackouts. Tensions throughout the city at that time are at the breaking point. Brooklyn, New York, July 31st, 1977, 1:45 a.m. Stacey Moskowitz and Robert Violante are on a first date. They're strolling down the street after having seen a movie together. They notice a strange man at a public toilet, but around 2 a.m. as they return to their car, they notice that the man is gone. Almost immediately upon re-entering the car, the couple is shot through the passenger side window. Stacey dies 38 hours later in the hospital. Robert survives, but ends up permanently blinded in one eye and with limited vision in the other. The Moskowitz-Violante shooting produces more witnesses than any of the other shootings. A young man who says he got a good look at the shooter claims he had blonde hair, but that it also appeared to be a wig. A woman is able to give the police a partial license plate, and several other witnesses describe seeing the same car, a yellow Volkswagen. Police determine that there are about 900 vehicles fitting that description in the area. They make a plan to track down every single owner of those cars. Several days after the shooting, the police are contacted by a witness called Cecilia Davis. Davis reports that while she was out walking her dog, she saw a yellow Ford Galaxy being ticketed for a parking violation. A strange man subsequently removed the ticket. Minutes later, she heard gunshots. A list of people who received tickets in that area is compiled. On that list is a 24-year-old postal worker from Yonkers, New York, named David Berkowitz. Investigators want to know what this Yonkers resident was doing 25 miles from home at 2 o'clock in the morning. On August 9th, Brooklyn detectives asked their counterparts in Yonkers to schedule an interview with Berkowitz. They're told that not only does Berkowitz fit the description of the son of Sam, but that he's already a suspect in other strange crimes, including arson. He's also suspected of sending threatening letters to his neighbors, particularly Sam Carr, who lives directly behind him. They also suspect that he shot Sam's dog. Yonkers, New York, August 10th, 1977, 6 p.m. Brooklyn detectives John Felitico and William Gardella arrive at the home of David Berkowitz. They decide to wait for Berkowitz to leave the apartment rather than risk a violent encounter. While they wait, they decide to investigate Berkowitz's yellow Ford Galaxy that is parked outside. Inside the car, they find a duffel bag filled with ammunition, maps of crime scene locations, and a threatening letter to the head of the Omega Task Force, Timothy Dowd. Just after 10 p.m., Berkowitz emerges from his apartment carrying a paper bag. As Berkowitz gets into his car, Balatico comes up from behind and puts his gun to Berkowitz's head and orders him to freeze. As the detective directs him to put his hands on the dashboard, he turns to them and smiles and says, "You got me. You got the son of Sam." Next to Berkowitz, in the paper bag, police officers discover a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver, the exact same caliber and model that had been used in all the previous shootings. Berkowitz is subsequently taken into custody and transported to the 60th precinct. Around 1 the following morning, the mayor announces that they finally caught the son of Sam. After the press conference, police officers escort Berkowitz to the NYPD headquarters. There, he is interviewed by Detective John Coffey. Within 30 minutes, Berkowitz confesses to all 8 shootings and states his interest in pleading guilty. When asked about the reasons behind the attacks, Berkowitz claims his neighbor, Sam Carr, from whom he gets his moniker Son of Sam, is a 6,000-year-old demon whose dog is possessed by the devil, and it commanded him to hunt and kill young women. Meanwhile, back in Yonkers, detectives search Berkowitz's apartment. Among other things, they find a scrapbook of Son of Sam clippings, his walls covered in satanic writing, and diaries filled with Berkowitz's thoughts and crimes. Who is this seemingly mild-mannered civil servant who terrorized New York for 12 months, shooting 15 people, killing 6? David Berkowitz was born Richard David Falco on June 1, 1953. Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz adopt him. The family lives in a middle-class home in the Bronx. The Berkowitzes are loving, but David grows up feeling scorned because he's adopted. He eventually develops a reputation for being a loner and a bully. When David is 14 years old, his adoptive mother dies of breast cancer. He becomes severely depressed and begins failing in school. Then, in 1971, his father remarries. When his father and new bride decide to move to Florida, they leave 18-year-old David behind. Later that year, David joins the army and he becomes a proficient marksman. During this time, he has his one and only sexual experience with a woman. He contracts a venereal disease which triggers his anger towards women. After an honorable discharge in 1974, he discovers that his natural mother is still alive. There is a brief reunion, but after she tells him that he's the product of an affair with a married man who did not want any more children, he stops visiting her. As David's anger and frustration deepens, he develops a taste for arson. According to his own diaries, David sets over 1,000 fires across New York City without ever getting caught by the police. Over the years, David's mental condition continues to deteriorate severely. He claims he hears voices of demons commanding him to commit murder. On Christmas Eve 1975, Berkowitz is walking on a pedestrian bridge in the Bronx when he sneaks up and stabs a 15-year-old girl from behind. The girl screams and struggles as he continues to attack. He stabs her 6 times before she's able to chase him away. After this event, Berkowitz moves to Yonkers, New York in April 1976. On July 28th, he quits his job as a security guard. Early the next morning, he commits his first murder by shooting Donna Lauria. On August 11th, David Berkowitz is arraigned for the murder of Stacey Moskowitz and the attempted murder of Robert Violante, his final victims before capture. He is denied bail and ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. On August 30th, Kings County Hospital delivers its psych report on David Berkowitz. The report concludes that Berkowitz suffers from paranoid psychosis, which means he is unfit to stand trial. The DA challenges the findings and receives court approval to have Berkowitz examined by an alternate psychiatrist. The new psychiatrist determines that Berkowitz understands the legal process and is therefore fit to stand trial. Prosecutors consolidate cases from all 3 boroughs into one massive case. The case will be presented in Brooklyn in front of 3 judges, 1 from each borough. Brooklyn, New York, May 8, 1978, 10 a.m. The David Berkowitz murder trial gets underway at Brooklyn Supreme Court. Berkowitz surprises the prosecution by refusing to enter an insanity plea. Instead, he pleads guilty to all the charges levied against him. On June 12, 1978, all 3 judges sentenced David Berkowitz to consecutive terms of 25 to life for each of the 6 murders he committed. More than 200 additional years are added to Berkowitz's sentences because of attempted murder and weapons charges. But despite the prosecutor's objections, the terms of his guilty plea make him eligible for parole in 25 years. Berkowitz undergoes 4 months of psychiatric treatment before he's transferred to Attica State Prison. Early in Berkowitz's incarceration, an attempt is made on his life, requiring almost 60 stitches to repair the slash across his throat. Berkowitz never reveals his attacker, believing he deserves what happened. He also instructs his lawyer to drop all appeals. In the aftermath of the Son of Sam case, Berkowitz had received numerous lucrative offers to tell his story. This caused New York to pass the Son of Sam law in 1977, prohibiting criminals from profiteering from their crimes. Today, 40 states have adopted similar statutes. For all the pain and misery caused by David Berkowitz, this law could be considered the one and only good thing to come out of his evil deeds. Although I'm sure that's cold comfort for his victims and their families.